Okay, I think we're gonna, as long as we got the three speakers here, we're just gonna roll right into the professional development panel, and this is gonna be on the industry slant for those of you that are interested in going out into the workforce immediately after graduating. And we have three individuals that we've asked to join us and present. And the first one is Davina Drugana, and I'm sorry if I did not get that last name right, but she is with the Walk Free Foundation. Very interesting background. I was putting together the slides, and I'm very excited to hear from you. I don't know you personally, so I'm excited. Thank you for joining us here and partaking in this. Tim Hesberger. I do know Tim. I've worked with Tim on other committees and such, and he's at Google. He's got lots of good advice. He's shared advice many times in the past on how to get jobs in industry, and he works at Google, so that's always fun and exciting. And then I found out that I have a connection with Stacy Winham as well. Stacy's from North Carolina State University, is where she got her degree, and is now just down the road at the Mayo Clinic from where I'm at. So Stacy Winham is the third panelist here. So thank you, all of you, for joining and sharing some advice on some questions that, again, I had asked them to consider. And I think we'll just go ahead and, before we get started, for those of you that are just joining us, we are going to save the questions till the end. I ask that you just put those questions into a chat window, and then I will keep track of those as we're going through the presentation here, and we'll just ask those at the end. Okay then, I think we're going to go ahead and get started with the first question that I asked the panel to consider. Oh no, we're not. I need to do more formal introductions. So why don't you each take a moment, we'll start at the top there and just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll start with the first question. Davina, you can go first.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Davina Durgana. I've been working in the anti-trafficking field for a while now. It's pretty much been my singular focus for the last, it says here, 10 years. Feels like a lot less than that. And my PhD is in international relations, but I focus on quantitative methods, and I basically created a vulnerability model to try to understand the prevalence of human trafficking. And now at the Walk Free Foundation, I get to do that on a global scale. And we work closely with Gallup World Poll to try to survey as many countries as we can every year.
Okay, Tim.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm at Google now, but I've also had a variety of other jobs at an electric utility, in academia, at a software company. One point I'll make is that there are a lot of good jobs out there. I've enjoyed every job I've had. One great thing about being a statistician is there's a lot of variety. You get to work with people in a lot of different areas. If you enjoy consulting, you can work with a lot of different people. I really enjoy that. Thank you.
Stacy?
I'm Stacy Winham, and I'm an assistant professor of biostatistics at Mayo Clinic. I specialize in statistical genetics. As Chris already mentioned, I have my degree from North Carolina State University. And at Mayo Clinic, I work in a variety of different clinical research projects. In particular, I work on molecular biomarker studies to identify risk for various diseases, in particular psychiatric disorders like bipolar disorder and addiction. And then I also do a lot of research in cancer genetics, specifically ovarian cancer and breast cancer.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll get on to the questions that I posed. The first one being, what does a typical day consist of? And Davina, maybe you can start there, and then we'll have Tim speak.
Sure, thank you. And as Tim mentioned, statistical consulting is so much fun. A typical day for me can be quite different. I do travel a lot for work. So when I'm traveling, that's very busy, but almost always exciting. And I get to meet and engage with government policymakers, often national statistics officers. And lately, we've been collaborating with the International Labor Organization to try to come up with one global estimate of human trafficking. So that's been quite exciting this year. Typically on a day though, if I happen to be stationed at home, because I'm based in DC, but my main office is in Perth, Australia, I get quite a bit of flexibility about where I can work and how that looks. And of course, we also have like our own peak times where we are basically working pretty much every day for a couple of weeks, but then we try to even that out during the other parts of the year, the slower parts of the year, and that's usually in the build up to the release of our Global Slavery Index every year.
Okay. Tim, why don't you talk about what you do there at Google?
It's a variety of things. One thing about Google is that we love people who take initiative, and I take initiative in a lot of different areas. I do miscellaneous statistical consulting for different groups at Google. I have my main project, which is work on estimating how effective display ads are. That involves programming, it involves working as part of a team, interacting with our product managers, figuring out what to do when things go wrong. We're running experiments, but experiments don't always work the way that you would think. And then other things like teaching bias busting workshops and helping Google get prepared for earthquakes. I live in Seattle, teaching some statistics here, etc. So I enjoy the variety.
Okay, Stacy, address that one as well.
Yes, like Davina and Tim, I do a lot of statistical consulting in my work as well. How Mayo Clinic is a little bit different than some other jobs in industry is that it's really probably more of a hybrid between industry and academia. And I do a lot of statistical consulting on research projects, but I also consider myself to be a collaborative researcher too. And I'm in on the ground up, I guess you would say, with designing various studies. My primary role is to lead statistical analyses for clinical research projects in 3 different areas: psychiatric, genetics, breast cancer, and ovarian cancer research. And what I do on a daily basis is work with the clinicians in these areas to design their studies to address their specific research questions, and also help them with writing their papers and their grants for funding. And additionally, I help with doing the dirty work of the data analysis. I coordinate how that analysis is done with master's level and bachelor's level statisticians and programmers that we have here at Mayo Clinic.
Okay, thank you very much. And then on this next one, I think we'll have Davina. I'm not gonna, for time reasons, I'm just going to have Davina and Stacy maybe take this one, and then we'll mix it up here on the next slide. So this one is, how should I prepare for coursework? So what things should they be taking in their courses or their curriculum for a job in industry, like at a new hire position? So let's have Stacy go first on this one.
Okay, sure. I think really in your coursework you want to focus a lot more on taking applied courses versus theoretical courses. If you're interested in a new hire position, and especially courses that will focus on developing your computer skills and also communication skills in addition to the statistical courses. So if you're interested in working in a healthcare setting, something like Mayo Clinic, I would suggest some of your basic biostats courses, or even really your basic statistics courses like regression and categorical data analysis, longitudinal data analysis, survival analysis, and maybe some epidemiology courses if you think you might be involved in study design in particular. But in addition to those stats courses, I think it's really important to kind of broaden your spectrum of coursework to include courses that might develop your programming skills, and maybe as data science becomes bigger, courses that might be focused more on data science or data mining. And then for developing your communication skills, if your institution offers a statistical consulting course, I would highly recommend taking that. And then possibly even a subject area specific course. Like for instance, for myself, since I was interested in statistical genetics, I took some genetics courses in addition to my statistics courses in order to be able to broaden your vocabulary, and that will help you in your consulting role to be able to speak the same language as your collaborators.
Okay, sounds very good. Davina, do you want to maybe touch a little bit on what you had said there as well?
I definitely agree with everything Stacy has said. The only thing I'd add is that, well, of course, learning as many languages as possible is really great because I think every organization will have their preferences in terms of what they like to use. Like my organization uses Stata, and we do that mostly because we collaborate with a lot of international organizations and perhaps, and I'm not really sure what characterizes a group that would use one programming software over another, but it just seems to be something that is pretty standard. Also, our colleagues at Gallup use it as well. So it is good to expose yourself to as many as you can, and of course they're really easily self-taught. Another thing is that I really enjoyed the time I spent at the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, ICPSR. It was a great opportunity to really, for me, I was having difficulty locating the level of courses I needed on Bayesian statistics, and I was able, and modeling, and I was able to find that there. So I think if you're struggling to really specialize within your own home institution, I would look into their summer courses.
Okay, I will just mention as we're getting through this, Tim has spent a lot of time talking about a lot of his career talking about resampling methods. He's actually written papers in this area, and he's the author of the resample package inside of R. So those of you that are looking for kind of some different coursework, and I agree, would certainly promote the resampling, their permutations and the bootstrap methods. And if you don't know what those are, I would encourage you to look up Tim Hesberger's name, and I'm sure it will pop up one of the top ones in Google because he's been studying that for quite some time. So I'm going to have Tim start with the next one, though, and that is how should I prepare for stuff outside of coursework? So what other things should I do? And I thought Tim here laid that out quite easily with a 1, 2, 3, 4. So Tim, why don't you talk about those quickly?
Well, we've got the 4 main criteria, and so that number 1 would relate to coursework. What statistics do you know? I would encourage you to get some practice doing consulting. A lot of what we do in the work here is like consulting work. We're working as part of a team. We're figuring out what the problem is, what data is available, how can we attack it, what to do when things go wrong. So some consulting practice would help with that, and it would help you when you're interviewing. When I interviewed, I actually created a consulting resume and brought that along and found it useful during the interviews. And communication is important. You've got to be able to write, and you've got to be able to do presentations that are a little bit more formal, and you also have to be able to work as part of a team, communicating both directions there. And of course, programming. You can't be a modern statistician if you can't program.
Yep, I agree. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Nope, that's it.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off there. And then I marked Stacy on this one as well. So Stacy, do you want to talk a little bit about what you have there?
Sure. A lot of what I've written is kind of similar to what Tim already said. Getting practical experience with consulting is incredibly important, especially to develop your communication skills in order to be able to explain complex concepts to someone who might not have as much statistical knowledge as you do. And in fact, I would suggest finding some sort of research project where you could not only have that consulting experience, but also the broad spectrum experience of taking an analysis from the very beginning where you get the data, clean the data, get it all prepared through the analysis, start to finish. And you could do this through either an internship possibly, or maybe some sort of research project. If you contact a professor at your institution, they might be able to set you up with a research project. Mayo does have a summer internship program that's open to both undergraduate students and graduate students. So if you'd be interested in that type of a internship, you can shoot me an email and I can forward you the info.
Okay, thank you on
Let me
that.
add, the ASA will create a list of internships. So you should look there for internships. I also recommend internships.
Yes, they do have a list of interns that are out there, and REU programs as well is usually kept on the ASA's website. So I think in the interest of time, I do want to keep pushing along here. I'm just going to have Tim talk a little bit about the computing skills. So Tim, do you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. So we use a variety of tools. We use a lot of R, Python, Google BigQuery, which is an SQL-like language. Basically, you want to have done some computing. Self-teaching is great, but unless you're using it in a real project, you won't really learn all the tricks that you need to use the program well in practice. And the more computing you've done, the easier it will then be when you come to a new place to pick up the tools that you need. So at Google, we don't use SAS, but if you learn SAS, that will help you learn other things when you get here.
Okay. I think I'm going to just keep going forward then on there. I'll have Davina address the first one on here. What questions do they like to ask on interviews? So students will often come into my office a week before an interview, and what things are they going to ask me? So I thought I'd throw this one on the screen and let you guys address. So Davina, do you want to take this one?
Sure, and I think it'll be interesting also to kind of hear the other panelists' perspective on this, because I think lots of organizations may approach this slightly differently. My organization has a statistical team that sits within a broader organization that includes policy folks, advocacy folks. So sometimes the people that are interviewing you or making the final decisions and determinations on your hire aren't necessarily statisticians. They may be people that need to understand and the distilled analysis, right? So it's kind of interesting when we hire, when we go through the new hire process, my team will come up with some basic data entry, data manipulation, data cleaning type of task, and then we'd ask you to perform some basic analysis in R because of, in Stata, because we have, we would just have our do files for tasks to follow. A lot of what students would do in these positions, though, is support this is kind of what Stacey was mentioning of, the project from the beginning to the end. And so a lot of what students would do for us would really come in the front end in terms of a lot of the data mining, data cleaning, as we develop and refine our models. So it's quite interesting. I think one thing you could demonstrate is, even if you're intimidated by the idea of demonstrating or actually engaging on a practical task for your interview, I think, doing it to the best of your abilities and then just clearly articulating the places where you would have sought more guidance would be very helpful.
Okay, very good advice there. Stacy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. So the type of interview questions that we ask at our institution are really not so much focused on demonstrating your skills. Like, we won't necessarily give you a task that you need to perform. They're a little bit more behavioral in nature, where we might pose a particular scenario and ask what you would do in that situation, or ask you to maybe give an example of a situation similar that you've faced and how you've handled it. So in that respect, it would be to your advantage to think up some experience or examples you have from your own coursework or research experiences where you've demonstrated particular skills that you'd like to highlight. For instance, listening and communicating. I think that's something that all three of us have hit on, that communication is key. So if you have particular examples to highlight where communicating helped you, and then also maybe project management or troubleshooting or problem solving. Those are areas that we would often be interested to hear more.
Okay. Yeah, Rob in the keynote address, I think, mentioned the idea of a portfolio, that students should have a portfolio put together so when they go out to even interview at graduate schools or interview at industries or visiting with graduate schools. I think that's what you mean there by prepare examples of your skills to kind of
Right.
highlight the type of work that they've done. I think I do agree
Yes.
that's become more and more important. You know, it's not good enough to just show people what classes you've taken, but you actually got to convince them that you can do something useful. So
Right.
take a
And
project.
I also have written here that I didn't mention that make sure you also have questions to ask of your interviewer. So in order to
Yes.
show interest in the particular company or institution, because
Yes.
usually there will come a time in the interview when they're done asking you questions, and then they will ask you, do you have any questions for them? And that's
That's,
an important place for you to show interest in the position.
you bet. Okay, great advice. Let's move. Maybe I should mention again, for those of you that are listening out there, there's a bunch of you listening, I can see. If you have questions, put those in the chat box. And then I will pass those on to our panelists here. So as of right now, I don't have any in the chat box. So please put some questions in there. We got just a couple more slides, and then we'll open this up for a Q&A session. Okay, so just like I asked earlier from the graduate school panel, you know, I try to have students to be prepared for the unexpected. So who wants to go first here? Maybe Tim, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. So in addition to those four main criteria, we look for leadership and we look for what we call Googliness. Basically, are you going to contribute positively to Google? You care about others. What do you do to make them more effective? Have you had leadership positions? Have you organized a club at your school? So we try to do great things, and we look for people who do things out of the ordinary, who don't just go to classes and do well in the coursework.
Okay. Looks like we were getting a little bit of feedback, but I think we're okay now. So I lost track there if Davina or Stacy, whoever each take. Davina, do you want to go next, I guess?
Sure. And I think that Stacy and my responses are quite similar. I think Stacy, if
Yes,
I'm
I was
not,
just going to say.
yeah, yeah, I think we obviously agree on this that asking for help is really critical. I think um, it really speaks to, you know, the level of confidence in your own abilities that, you know, a lot of us have very particular styles of working within our organizations. We wouldn't expect others to kind of be onboarded immediately and be able to understand exactly how we prefer for things to be done. But to just kind of assume that you might know what that looks like and to forge ahead and kind of spend a lot of time producing a product that's ultimately not what we need would probably be a worse outcome than just asking for help.
Okay. As long as those two, Stacy, as long as yours is pretty similar, I'm going to go to the last slide, and then I'll let each of you share your lifelong advice for starting out in a career in statistics. So, Stacy, you can go first here.
Okay. Especially as you're starting out in your careers, I think it's important to realize that you need to be in charge of your own career. You know, as a student, you typically have an advisor and someone who's looking out for your best interests. And once you move outside, depending on where you get your job, you might not necessarily have that. You know, many institutions or companies might have some sort of formal mentoring program, but not all. So you need to be in charge of your own career and maybe seek out good mentoring on your own if that's not provided for you. And also we've hit on already how important it is to get practical experience. So I don't know if I really need to belabor that anymore. And
Okay.
I'll let my other panelists have a little more time to speak.
All right, Tim, go ahead.
Well, on this slide was some advice that's actually for interviewing. I would second also the advice that when you are at the job, do ask questions. There are no private offices at Google, and the reason for that is we want people to sit with their team and be able to easily turn around and ask questions. Don't work on something and get stuck in it. Just ask somebody. They may know a good way to do it. And keep learning. You learn some things in school, but there's a lot you can't learn. There's way too much to learn, but keep learning throughout your life. Thank you.
All right, that's good advice. And Davina?
Yeah, so my advice is mostly something that I think probably sounds pretty cliche, but I think is really critical. So if you think about what you're going to do, I think there's a lot of people out there that can do a lot of things well. The real question is how do you find the niche area that really is advantageous to your overall career? And I say this because I came into academia with the position that there was not sufficient quantitative analysis in the anti-trafficking field. So I kind of pushed to fill that niche myself, and doing that has really given me a career that I couldn't have expected and that I really enjoy. So I think looking for those little opportunities and then really pursuing them like full force is essential.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for the three of you. We do have some questions coming in the chat window there. Cassandra has the first one. For those considering a career in data analysis versus similar fields or careers, how would you say you know that stats and data analysis is a good fit? Okay, so how would somebody know that they would like a career in stats or data analysis?
I'll start. Do you enjoy solving problems, and do you enjoy working with people, figuring out what their problems are and explaining things to them?
Okay, that's good advice, Tim. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I would just add that I think you can have I think there are different levels of data analysis that you can do. You can do work that has a really heavily like programming and data analysis focus, or you can do applied statistics in a variety of fields that really just require you to be almost like, quantitative science literate. So I think if you enjoy math, if it's something you can do well, often I think many of us have experienced that there are very many people that are intimidated by numbers, and that already presents an almost an advantage in many fields. So I think the question is less the how you want to do it, and I think the how here is like the methods question. The real question to me would be, what do you want to do with it? Like, what is the substantive focus of your work?
Okay, thank you for that. I have another one that's maybe a kind of a so the question is, what, according to you, is the best programming language for predictive analytics? So this individual knows Stata, knows R, but they're wondering if they should go learn Python. Any suggestions there? I know once you know one language, it's pretty easy to go to another, but Tim or Davina or Stacy?
I'll jump in here,
Yep.
which is that we have a lot of computer scientists at Google and software engineers, and they look at R and they shriek. They're appalled. R is really not well designed as a programming language. It's got some great advantages for statistics, but there are a lot of things that go wrong with it. And so they really like Python. And there are people here who are moving toward Python rather than R, depending on the project that they're doing. So I would put in a word for Python because you can handle larger data with it. It's a better programming language. It doesn't yet have all of the packages that are available in R, but I think over time they'll come.
Okay. And we actually here at Winona State have started teaching a little bit of Python in some of our data science classes to try to round out their education. So we certainly use R quite a bit, but I would agree that Python is a good language to use, and a lot of scientists are using that. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our time again here. I really want to thank the panelists for sharing their expertise here on a Friday afternoon. I don't know about where you're at, but here in Winona it's pretty nice out, so I'm glad that they were able to stay inside in their offices and share with us some of their advice. So if I was able to clap, I don't know how to clap online, but thank you again for doing that. I also want to just thank all the audience members that have participated here in the professional development panel this afternoon, but also all day long. We started this at noon today with some students that presented some award winners, eUSRC award winners. We are running that competition again, so if you have done research or you've done projects in your statistics classes, I encourage you to look up those. That's a eUSRC competition, it's called, and it can be found on the CauseWeb website. So we started today with those award winners. We had Rob Gould as our keynote address. Rob did a great job with that. And then we had the virtual poster session here before the professional development panel. So thank you for the students that contributed to that. And then again, I want to thank all of the panelists that took part here in the last hour for both the graduate school panel and the industry career panel. I guess that's all I have. I appreciate your attendance and look forward to doing this again in the future. So thank you, everybody.